Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, welcome to the Embassy of Hungary. I have to say it's a special day for two reasons. One reason is looking back 1 year and looking back the year of 2019. These days we were extremely busy because we had a big delegation receiving Prime Minister Orbán last year, opening our biggest ever cultural event in Japan, a big exhibition at the National Art Center, and opening our new culture center. It was exactly a year ago. It's a special day today as well because we can feel busy. And then, in this position where I'm at or where we are at, feeling busy is always good. It means things are happening. And today is one of those days when we can feel busy for a good cause. Having this event being a reality, both offline and online here at the embassy. Well, it all started with a meeting with Ms. Rabel Bauer, the representative of Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, also last year, just before our Prime Minister's visit. And then we agreed to do something together. We agreed to do something together to show how we look at the European Union and make this institution a little bit more visible for the Japanese from our perspectives as well. So that's where the idea of this event started. Of course, little did we know at that time that we'll be in a situation like now in the midst of a pandemic. And we started the preparations in January. We didn't have a clue about that either. But then throughout the course, we reinvented, we reshaped, we recreated this event. And then finally, we could keep the original date of the event that we set already in January. We set the 4th of December already in January as a date. And I think in the midst of the pandemic, this is something to be very proud of, that you could keep an event relatively intact in this situation. We are all going through challenges and in our everyday lives because of the coronavirus. And our institutions are also going through challenges in these days, including the European Union. Some people say that even our foundations have been shaken. You'll see if it's true or not, but I don't think that if there is any more timely time to have the German motto of the presidency more accurate, make Europe stronger together. Again, I don't think there is any more timelier time than now. So this is a special period, and how we are getting out of this special period and how we are reinventing ourselves from this special period. This is what we are seeking the answers for, especially when it comes to the external affairs of the European Union. It will be not me, and it will be not us who are trying to give answers, but it will be two distinguished gentlemen that will be joining us from Brussels. Mr. Olivér Várhelyi, our Commissioner for Neighbourhood and Enlargement, and also Mr. David McAllister, member of the European Parliament and the chair on the Committee on Foreign Affairs. And then we also have a distinguished moderator from Japan, Mr. Tsuruoka Michito, one of Japan's foremost security policy experts who will help us guide us through this 1 hour, which is realized in a hybrid format, both online and offline. As you can see, we have a small space station on the side that will help us through the difficulties that the technology poses us. Of course, I need to greet my fellow colleagues and primarily Ambassador Ina Lepel, the Ambassador of Germany, who was kind enough to accept our invitation and also kind enough to accept our request to give a toast, a Kampai speech, following this a short event, because what we could keep in these times is a networking event that will be followed after this seminar. It will be a little bit different than before, but I hope that it will serve the same purpose, and then it will be up to your expectations and up to your taste, both in terms of content as well as when it comes to the food. I would like to greet my friend and fellow colleague, Ambassador of Poland, Paweł Milewski, who is also representing the current president of the Visegrad 4 countries. And Poland is the current president of the V4 countries here. And of course, I need to greet representing the delegation of the European Union, Mr. Heitze Siemers, that who is also here with us and will give a few thoughts after me here. I have to add, and this is my last thought, that the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung is very important for us, Hungary as well. They've been here in Hungary since the early 1990s and helped us through the transition, helped us through our difficult times that resulted Hungary to become a country of Central Europe and graduated from the legacies of communism and legacies of Eastern Europe. And I also need to add that the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung is very closely linked to the Christian Democratic Union, who brought us many valuable statements, among them Helmut Kohl. Without him, we wouldn't be here today, and without him, our dream to be a part of Europe wouldn't have been a reality. So with that, I wish you good content, good speeches, maybe inspiring questions, and after that, valuable and enjoyable time at the Hungarian Embassy here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.
So, as we are live now, I am Rabea Brauer from the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, and I like to warmly welcome you in the room, but of course also everyone out there, those we are not seeing here coming together, but those who are watching us on the screen. So the event has officially begun. Thank you, Norbert, for your very kind words. I think you have outlined everything that there is to say about the close partnership that KAS enjoys with your country, with Hungary, with the Fidesz party. And I have heard question of why is a rather unlikely cooperation. No, it is not, because we go back way back when. And I think it is when we have differences, and there are many in the EU, it is best to foster a dialogue, and it's best to stay in friendship terms. And this is why we have this event today. We also want to highlight, of course, what is happening in the EU, because the EU is looking east, is looking to enhance partnerships, is looking at free trade agreements, is looking at military cooperations. And so this time today, we're showing what's going on west in the EU. And I like to thank very much our dear speakers who are tucked away on the screen, who you will be hearing right now. Our Member of Parliament, David McAllister, who kindly agreed to join us, and of course our Commissioner Várhelyi from Hungary. And both of us, both of those will stage the discussion today. It is my honor to introduce our dear moderator, Michito Tsuruoka, who's well known to all of us here and probably well known to many who are watching us today. Michito Tsuruoka is a professor at the Keio University, one of the most renowned scholars in Japan. He's a senior researcher, or was a senior researcher of the National Institute of Defense Studies of NITS. He's a fellow of the Tokyo Foundation, and he was a fellow of the GMF. His areas of expertise, known to you, are NATO, European integration, and European foreign policy, and this is why we have asked him to help us today and to moderate this prestigious session. Once again, a warm welcome from my side. I don't want to take away any further time from the event that we've all been waiting for. Thank you very much to the Hungarian Embassy for this really, truly welcomed cooperation. I don't know how many hundreds emails did go back and forth in order to stage this today. I also want to pass a thank to Gabor and my colleague Naoki-san. Our teams have done a tremendous job, and I think this is not the last event we are seeing. But for now, I wish us all good discussions and, yeah, a good 1 hour. Michito, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be moderating this session today. I myself very much look forward to discussions today. So the title of today's discussion is Together Make Europe Strong Again. So it's really a interesting and provocative, I think, a way to put things. And so in terms of thinking about making Europe strong again, of course, in light of what's been taking place, particularly COVID-19, so internally, the Europe needs to be strong again, but at the same time, externally as well, because the international relations, international order is becoming a more difficult. So for the EU to have play a big role, a substantial big positive role, I think there are various challenges. So to talk about these things, and we are quite fortunate that we have two distinguished speakers joining from Europe, joining both from Brussels, I guess. And so the first speaker is Mr. Olivér Várhelyi. So, sorry for my bad pronunciation. He is a European Commissioner for Neighbourhood and Enlargement. So before that, he was a permanent representative of Hungary to the European Union. So he's been now very much at the center of EU policy making. And also another speaker is David Macalester, Mr. David Macalester. He's a chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament. So he's from Germany, and he once was the Minister President of Lower Saxony in Germany from 2010 to 13. And also he's a Vice President of the European People's Party, EPP. So and also this event is taking place to mark the first anniversary of the European Commission, which started last December. And at the same time, we are meeting here toward the very end of the German presidency of the EU Council, so the second half of this year. So without further ado, I think I can now invite Mr. Várhelyi from Brussels.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's very early still here, so please try to bear with me if not everything is so logical what I say. But my task here, as I understand, is to give you an outline how the COVID pandemic affected Europe and its neighborhood, and also what impact it will have on the enlargement policy and neighborhood policy. And whether what we do in these areas are to be strengthened. First of all, the pandemic has affected very heavily, both socially and economically, the European Union and also its neighbors. If you look at the figures, what you will see is that most likely in this year, European economies are going to contract by as much as 7.4%. This is worse than the 2008 crisis, and this is comparable. This is becoming comparable to the big economic shock in the beginning of the 19th century. We hope that there will be a rebound as from next year, very much linked to the availability of the vaccines and being able to do away with all the restrictions that we had to introduce for our economy and for the protection of our population. We do hope that next year there will be a strong rebound of at least, on average, 4.1%, and this should be followed at least by 3% growth in 2022. Unemployment is the other issue, of course, that with the crisis, many jobs have been lost, although governments have been deploying substantive funds to try to save companies and try to bridge the period of the crisis when economic activity has fell. And for that reason, we will also have relatively high government deficits compared to the stringent rules that we apply in normal times. In the neighborhood, what you see is that we have countries like the Western Balkans, where their level of economic output is lower than 50% of ours. If I want to grasp the biggest challenge between for the European Union and for the neighboring countries, is this significant gap in economic development, which creates a number of challenges that are common challenges and that have been there with us for a number of years now, and which are having a very negative impact on the region. So what we have seen during the crisis was that a similar effect has taken its toll on the economies and the societies. So we have to think about a joint recovery designed together with our neighbors. I understand that this conference is mainly focused on the Western Balkans, so I would let me talk about them more in depth, and also to explain how do we think that we could design the recovery from this crisis together. First of all, we have tried to deploy all our efforts also in the neighborhood countries, because we are sharing the continent with them, and of course our economies are becoming more and more interlinked, and our societies as well. Therefore, we have been trying to help them to address first the health part of the crisis, so to speak. Second, to raise their healthcare capacities, and third, to provide a possibility to save the economy. Only in the Western Balkans we have deployed 3.3 billion euros to help them achieve that. And of course, we have also been providing significant financial help for the Southern Neighborhood and in the Eastern Partnership countries. Now, turning to the Western Balkans, as this is the region where enlargement policy takes place, and this is where Europe has a very high stake, as this region is surrounded only by EU member states. This is where the new Commission, our Commission, has doubled the efforts to bring them closer, much faster than before. In the pandemic, we have discovered how to speed up these processes, and we have come up with new modalities, how to help them to overcome these difficulties. But our work has started first with the renewal of our enlargement policy. The renewal meaning to make it more predictable, to make it more credible, to make it more of a political and less than an administrative process. Also to create larger public support within the EU and also outside the EU for this project. It was on that basis that we have managed to agree with the member states to open the accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. And there's a third element which is going to be crucial after the crisis. We have launched in October, early October, a major economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans. The idea behind this is not only to jointly develop an economic strategy to recover from the economic crisis, but also to create a tool through which we can speed up the catching up of the economies of the Western Balkans. We aim to mobilize roughly 9 billion euros in grants, and we would like to raise at least 10 billion euros in investment through guarantees. This is the Western Balkans Guarantee Facility. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the operation, we are talking about roughly 1/3 of the total GDP of the entire region. This is a very important project for them. This is what I have heard for them. as this is the first time that Europe is really deploying a comprehensive plan how to raise the economies. We have a new approach in this plan by putting forward 10 flagship initiatives on the most important bottlenecks in front of economic development. We are having ideas about linking up all the capitals of the Western Balkans with highways and railways. We are thinking about helping to build high-speed broadband internet core networks between the capitals that are completely missing. We are thinking about helping them to phase out completely coal, which is the single biggest healthcare risk in the region, but also through which only to switching to gas, we could reduce their emissions by 60% together with them. And of course, we are also looking at projects how to deploy a knowledge-based economy in there and how to turn this region into an attractive investment hub also globally. And if we do everything right, this plan should at least raise the economies of the Western Balkans by 3.6%. And let me put a footnote here and also bring a direct message to our Japanese partners that when we design this economic plan, of course, we are looking at companies who are interested in coming closer to European markets, and especially companies in our allies and companies of our allies, just like Japan. The Japanese companies would be more than welcome to contribute to this plan and also to reap the benefits together of this plan, together with our Western Balkan countries. So let me present this plan also for you as food for thought and also something on which we could work together with your companies and with your government. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Okay, now may I invite the second speaker, David McAllister, please.
Dear Professor Tsuruoka, Your Excellency, the Ambassador, dear Commissioner Olivér Várhelyi, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this invitation and thank you to the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation for organizing this. Ohayo gozaimasu from Brussels and konnichiwa to all of you in Tokyo. I would like to briefly comment on the review of 1 year of this new European Commission led by Ursula von der Leyen, and I'd also like to briefly take stock of the German presidency in this second half of 2020. As mentioned, it was exactly 1 year ago that the new European Commission under the head of Ursula von der Leyen took office. And in this December 2019, there was no sign of a global pandemic, at least not here in Europe. Right from the beginning, the new Commission put forward a set of ambitious goals for the future of the European Union, ambitious goals that I welcomed and still welcome. A European Green Deal, which formulates a roadmap for how to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. A new agenda for shaping Europe's digital future was presented. A new industrial strategy ought to prepare the European industry for the green and digital transformation. And the transition into a, quote, geopolitical, unquote, commission was announced, focusing on Europe's resilience and strategic sovereignty. Just after these promising initiatives during the first 100 days, Europe was hit from the coronavirus, causing a severe public health crisis and an unprecedented economic shock. Commissioner Várhelyi was just talking about this. Yes, initially the European Union faced difficulties in responding in a coordinated way to this crisis. Certainly this was due to a lack of competence of the institutions in Brussels. The crisis once again revealed how fragile the European project still is. The first reflexes, regrettably, were rather national and not entirely European. At the same time, however, we have also seen a Europe of solidarity. Member states have come to each other's aid. The European Commission responded decisively and took the initiative to play a coordinating role, despite its limited responsibility, by creating, for instance, a strategic stockpile of medical equipment, launching the so-called Reopen EU process, taking the lead to coordinate the reopening of our internal borders in Europe after weeks of confinement, and also adopting a temporary framework to enable member states to use the full flexibility foreseen under state aid rules. These are just a few examples of the European Union's actions that were taken by the Commission. Now, when the German presidency of the Council took over on the 1st of July, for these 6 months now, and they took over from Croatia, the German presidency did this in the middle of a global health crisis. The agenda was very different from what we initially expected. And the expectations were extremely high, in some ways simply too high. The leitmotif of the German presidency is Gemeinsam Europa wieder stark machen, which translates more or less into English, and that's how we chose the English translation, Together for Europe's Recovery. It's about the management of the pandemic and recovery from the pandemic. The pandemic and the recovery of the pandemic, they have become the top priorities. A key step was accomplished on the 10th of November. The European Parliament and the EU member states and the Council reached a historic agreement on the next long-term budget for 2021 till 2027, and on the so-called Next Generation EU, the temporary recovery instrument. Once adopted, the package of a total of 1.8 billion euros will be the largest package ever financed through the European Union budget. Unfortunately, this crucial instrument in the moment is blocked by 2 member states due to the rule of law mechanism, a main objective of the European Parliament. This mechanism means that for the first time, the EU budget will be protected when breaches of the rule of law principles lead to misuse of EU funds. I don't want to go into the details of this debate, but we need to find a unanimous decision of the 27 member states. And behind the scenes in Brussels, a lot of parties involved are trying to find a compromise, trying to find a solution. And I do hope that the parties involved will be able to find this agreement soon in order to make the money available on the 1st of January 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, a final remark. On the 1st of January, the United Kingdom will definitely leave the internal market and the customs union. We are now in the crucial phase of the negotiations on our future relations between the United Kingdom and the European Union. The next hours, I guess, will be decisive for the outcome. Let me underline, the European Union is committed to conclude the best possible agreement for an ambitious partnership with the British. We are hoping that the final push to unblock the negotiations can be made now. However, at this stage, it simply isn't possible to say whether there will be a final agreement or not. Our British partners have to move on 3 major stumbling blocks that can make the difference between getting a deal or not having a deal. It's about rules on fair competition, the overall governance architecture, and fisheries policy. While we all hope that the gaps in the negotiations can be bridged in the next hours and days, and an agreement will be reached, we need to be prepared for all contingencies in order to give clarity for our citizens and businesses as of the 1st of January 2021. Finding a deal would certainly be better for both sides, since an uncontrolled British exit from the European single market and the customs union would have immense economic consequences. I will keep it there. Once again, let me thank the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation for making this conference possible, for organizing this event. And indeed, we in Brussels are determined to make Europe strong again after this pandemic, which has hit Japan, our close partner in Asia, just as hard as us in the European Union. And let me also underline that we know exactly how important Japan is for us, and what we have in common, apart from all the economic links, is we are democracies. We believe in the rule of law, and that's why we in Europe, I guess just as in Japan, we're looking forward to the newly established alliance of democracies that we bring the United States, Canada, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and other like-minded partners together to shape the globalized world of the 21st century. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. McAllister. Okay, now we have had two fascinating and stimulating remarks from Europe. So now, before opening to the floor, let me ask you some questions. And first, since we have been talking a lot about COVID, and I have to actually ask what is taking place about the multi-year EU budget, because when the deal was done back in July, the interest in Japan in that was really high. So we saw a lot of newspaper articles and a TV report from Brussels. The longest ever European Council was very much they attracted a lot of attention in Japan as well. And then we thought that now the deal is done, but in fact it doesn't seem to be the case. So to be quite frank, we are wondering what's taking place. So that's my question to both of you, and that's my first sort of common question to two speakers. The one specific question to the commissioner is that yes, the Western Balkans, that's really an important region, and also for Japan as well. Japan has been very much involved in the Western Balkans, particularly after the end of the Cold War and reconstruction and process, and we have been Japan has been there. And last September, a bit more than 1 year ago, the European Union and Japan signed a connectivity partnership between the two partners. And then it is about doing various connectivity projects in areas situated between Europe and Japan. So it is, from a Japanese point of view, many people believe that it is very much about Indo-Pacific, but in fact it's not, and it's much broader than that. And so we have been thinking of doing some project together with the Europeans in Africa and Western Balkans as well. So Western Balkans actually is one of the priority areas in the context of the connectivity partnership. So we are very much interested in that. So question, I'm personally quite interested in that, and in part because of the various interesting developments concerning China in the Western Balkans. So the European Union, I think, has become more vocal in expressing concerns about not only Russia's activities there, but at the same time Chinese activities there. So my question is that from your point of view, how do you see the differences between what Chinese are doing and what Russians are doing in the Western Balkans, particularly in the context of your concerns about or negative impact or negative result of what they are doing? So how do you compare, and what that's my question. And related to that, the 17+1, that is a quite interesting framework. But the Brussels has been expressing some concerns about that framework. So from your point of view, what's particularly looking at the Western Balkans, what's the biggest problem? What concerns you the most regarding 17+1? That's my question to Mr. Commissioner. And my question to Mr. Macalester is also related to China, but not exclusively on China, because I'm very much interested in the European debates on the European version of the Magnitsky Act, the human rights sanctions. Yes, you are about to launch that. So and people are wondering who will be the first target of Magnitsky Act. So Russians or Chinese or Africans and other Asians, whoever. So I very much would like to ask you about your expectations about this European Magnitsky Act. And another a bit related question is that now the relationship between China and Australia is really hot. So because Australia is now very much a target of coercive economic measures by China. So the Australian wines and other things that are very much targeted. So we are wondering how we could, of course, expressing solidarity with Australians. Yes, that's one thing. But in concrete terms, what do you think you can do to mitigate Australian suffering, or not? So going beyond just expressing concerns and solidarity, what in concrete terms you think you can do? So it's almost like a collective defense in economic field type of idea. So I'm wondering, and I would be very grateful if you could share your views with us. So the first, I think, may I invite Mr. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, you are putting your finger exactly where the challenge is, and I was pointing to this connectivity partnership when I described the major opportunity that we see in front of Japanese companies as well, to contribute to this plan and complement this plan, because this plan is open for any investors from our allies, is first, of course, from our member states, and also the bilateral support that our member states are providing. We would like to coordinate this with the implementation of our plan, so to increase our leverage, both economically and politically. So I think you are more than welcome to contribute to this. Second, you have talked about the external influences of the Western Balkans that has become also a political concern. It seems not only in Europe, but also in Japan. And there, what I can tell you is that there is one thing no one else can offer to this region, and that is EU membership. And this only shows the privileged position this region has in the European Union, and the European Union has in this region. And this is the basis of our relationship, that we are committed and determined to have this region fully integrated as members in the European Union in mid-term, long-term. Now, if I want to compare the external influences, what I can tell you is take a look at our investment plan. This is the most attractive support scheme that has ever been offered to the Western Balkans. While if you compare it to the other, so to speak, offers that are there, they are not based on grants, they are based on loans in a time when fiscal space is shrinking, and in a time when governments are also struggling with the effects of the pandemic in terms of budget deficit, in terms of lack of workplaces. So we think that what we have been suggesting and providing not only addresses all the issues that outside influences are likely to offer to be solved, but also gives a comprehensive plan to bring sustainable long-term strategy for creating growth and jobs. And in the meantime, also a plan that will create a completely different landscape of the region within 4 to 5 years. This is something no one can offer to this region but the European Union. Finally, if you want me to compare our position in the Western Balkans, I could compare the Japanese position in Southeast Asia to ours in the Western Balkans. It would be very difficult for us to try to create the same leverage as you have in Southeast Asia, as it is difficult for anybody from Asia to create the same leverage that we have in the Western Balkans. But this is not a given. This is something that we need to work for. This is something that we need to invest in, and this is why we're so active.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Macalester, please.
Yes, thank you, Professor. You asked me about the European Union's relations with China. China is probably one of the most challenging relations we in the European Union are facing. Now, you in Japan know the Chinese much better than we do, and you're in their immediate neighborhood. But we see on the one hand the potential dealing with China. On the other hand, we of course also see the difficulties. The European Commission in March last year outlined 4 main categories for defining China as an interlocutor. China is on the one hand a cooperation partner on climate change, for instance. China is a negotiating partner, for instance, on investment or issues of connectivity. China is an economic competitor and also a systemic rival in terms of fundamental values, most notably in the area of human rights. So this translates for me into the conclusion that EU policy regarding China should be based on 3 principles: cooperate where possible, compete where needed, but also confront where necessary. And we all know that we have major differences with China when it comes to ensuring the consistency of value-based foreign policy. And that's why I believe we need to redefine our approach and relationship with China. Now, finally, you asked me concretely about the Magnitsky Act. Well, as a matter of fact, the European Union has adopted a mechanism for applying sanctions to individuals for human rights violations separately from their national governments. These decisions are now going to be taken. And this means, for example, that an individual of a country where human rights violations are committed can be sanctioned without sanctions against the country being in place. So this move puts the European Union in line with the United States and the United Kingdom that have already put in place so-called Magnitsky Acts. This allows states to punish foreign officials that transgress human rights. The documents which are going to be adopted provide a long list of violations that could be punished with travel bans and asset freezes in the European Union. The lists include genocide, crimes against humanity, arbitrary arrests or detentions, torture, slavery, sexual and gender-based violence, violations or abuses of freedom of peaceful assembly and of association, and human trafficking. I'll keep it there.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I would like to collect some questions from the floor, and also for those who are joining us online, you can also put your questions in a Q&A section of your screen. So, okay, please.
My name is Yamamoto. Actually, I worked for the United Nations in Afghanistan at the SISG. And so, and thank you very much for the nice presentations. You know, the pandemic has actually created or posed us or brought in relief three types of perhaps questions or issues. One is the sort of immediate thing that you have to deal with, like pandemic itself, economic growth, and unemployment. Then there are two other issues. One is the discrepancy in the sufferings of the people over the globe. The vulnerables are hit the worst, but this also had brought, in fact, even more fundamental question of the limitations, or shall I say, problems, which the free economy or free competition has brought into society. And also, this has probably encouraged the people who want to challenge democracies and other ideal that we had shared for over 75 years. And this is something that perhaps the European Union, together with the countries who face common ideals for the future and common values, we need to tackle, in addition to dealing with the immediate questions that you have talked about. The United Nations, as you know, considers that the pandemic has brought big issues and problems, but also could provide opportunity or chance to look at those fundamental issues and for the countries to come together to address the contradictions, if you like, or negative aspects of the system that had brought us prosperity over the past 75 years. My question is EU willing to take an approach which addresses these sort of fundamental problems? And if so, how would you like to go about doing that? Which mechanisms? What are the sort of countries that you want to talk with? Do you want to work with the United Nations or smaller countries? You want to work with Japan or just Europe-centric? And is there any kind of thinking in that respect? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps one more question from the floor.
My name is Miyoshi. I'm a journalist. I have a journalistic question. Yesterday, Poland's Deputy Prime Minister Jarosław Gowin announced that the, so to say, EU budget veto program by Poland and Hungary could be solved by announcing a sort of announcement if they could reach a consensus about the announcement. Do you think it could break a deadlock of the so to say EU budget program? And do you expect in the coming weeks some consensus could be reached? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So time is quite limited, but let me pick up a few questions given online. And the first is about Green Deal. So do you think the funding for Green Deal is just a one-off thing, or you think that should be continued even after COVID? And second is about Russia. So given the various divisions and differences of opinions in the European Union, how do you think the EU needs to deal with Russia? Any any comments or any ideas. So let me invite the ambassador, the Commissioner Várhelyi first, please.
Well, these are very broad issues that you asked me. The first question especially, the EU's position is very clear that we want fair and free global competition when it comes to markets, be it investments, be it trade. We need to have free and fair conditions applicable to all. And this is why we think that there is quite a bit to be done. Yes, I agree that the COVID distorted to some extent the global competition. We do hope that with the new administration in the US and together with our allies and partners like Japan, South Korea, Australia, we can bring this issue back to the forefront. Now, on this announcement by the Polish Deputy Prime Minister, I must admit I'm not part of these discussions, and maybe you should ask those who are. These are very delicate discussions. One thing is certain, time is running out, so we have to find a solution. On the Green Deal, no, it is not a one-off. If you look at the Green Deal, what you see is quite long-term with the 2050 climate neutrality goal. The EU is planning very much ahead. So this is a long-term economic transformation and transition that we are planning together with our member states. And it should have a major impact in the economy and also in the society. On Russia, I think our 5 principles are well known, and we're not changing them. So we stick to the 5 principles that we have always been using when setting our policies towards Russia.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Macalester, please.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make 3 remarks. The first one is on the multi-annual financial framework and the next generation EU recovery fund. Council and Parliament had found an agreement in principle, but we need the support of all 27 member states. And in the moment, you're also aware that we still have some internal debates. I don't know if we will find a compromise and how this compromise will look like, but as a convinced European, I can only say the sooner we find an agreement, the better, because the sooner we found an agreement, the money could actually be made available on the 1st of January. And we know that some of our member states are urgently waiting for the financial support. The second remark, and I can underline what Commissioner Várhelyi just said, is about shaping the new global order. The expectations here in Europe are high that from the 20th of January on, with President-elect Joe Biden, we can give transatlantic relations a new impetus, but not only transatlantic relations, but also how we can work together with like-minded partners, including Japan. And in the end, for us, 3 points are important: to strengthen multilateral action and international institutions. We need a pursuit of common interests and leveraging our collective strength as Western democracies. And finally, and referring to the question of the speaker, we need to look for solutions that respect our common values of fairness, openness, and competition. We in the European Union are very much in favor of competition. Competition is good, but competition has to be fair. And that's where our difficulties lie with China. Our economic competition, as it stands in the moment, is not balanced and it's not fair. And that's why China will have to move on certain fields. And finally, on EU-Russia relations, one thing Japan and the European Union have in common is that this huge country, Russia, is our neighbor. EU-Russia relations have been severely strained by a number of violations of international law and breaches of taboos by Russia. Russia is often part of protracted conflicts that make it difficult to find a solution. This is showcased by the illegal annexation of the Crimea, the support for dictator Assad in Syria, or recently the situation in Belarus, where Moscow obviously plays an influential role. So the relations with Russia remain challenging, and we have to be very firm on our principles and values dealing with the regime of Mr. Putin in Moscow.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to finish this session, and it's been a fascinating discussion. And one thing is clear, which is that we need to continue this sort of dialogue. So that perhaps next time we would want to welcome you in person in Tokyo. So that's my message. And also, I'm very much sorry about the technical problems, and I very much apologize any inconveniences caused. And so that's it from me. And then I'd like to invite Hungarian ambassador, please.
Arigato, sayonara.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your support and then listening. As you could experience, we are still on the learning stage. We are learning how to cope with this situation. We are learning how to cope with the post-pandemic situation, and we are learning to cope with the hybrid events as well. This will not be the last event, I'm sure. This was the first that we are holding here together with COS, but this will not be the last for sure. And I hope that now we can continue real-time, face-to-face, of course, trying to keep as much precautions as possible, and going over to the room, which is right next to us, enjoying some Hungarian wines and Hungarian food as well. And before we do that, I would like to invite the ambassador of Germany, representing the current EU presidency, Ambassador Ina Lepel, to give a few words for Kampai and before we head on to the other room. So once again, thank you very much, Ambassador. Please, the floor is yours.
Dear Norbert, Ambassador of Hungary, dear colleagues and excellencies, Professor Tsuruoka, Ms. Brauer, dear participants in this interesting event. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to thank everybody for making it possible and for this interesting discussion. I really don't want to keep you from the networking, so just very briefly, as has been alluded to by the distinguished panelists, the pandemic really forced us to completely rethink the German presidency. And we came up with a new motto of Together Make Europe Strong, or in the official translation, Together for Europe's Recovery. And basically, there are two aspects to that. One is solidarity and one is sovereignty. So the main points that we then decided to focus on were coping with the global health crisis, but also its social economic repercussions. So the new generation EU Recovery Fund comes into play. Second, of course, as has been alluded, bringing the MFF negotiations to a successful end. And of course, the EU-UK negotiations on future relations. And fourth, increasing the European Union's strategic and political clout in world affairs, or in what we would say, strengthening EU sovereignty. And that's the point I would like to focus on, because on the other aspects, there has already been a lot of talk. So what we would like to do is, and what we did promote, was a strong and coherent EU action on a number of pressing foreign policy issues at the regional and at the global level. In support of the High Representative, we contributed to a joint and determined EU response to the developments in Belarus and to the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. There were intensive efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you. We made concrete proposals for new transatlantic agenda with the new US administration. And more focused on this region, together with France and the Netherlands, we started discussions about an EU outlook on this part of the world. We just this week finally saw the day when EU and ASEAN concluded a strategic partnership. And although the EU-China summit in the full format could not take place because of the coronavirus, we have the impression that just the fact that it was in the room helped create a more unified position and more convergence of views on relations with China. And of course, all these aspects offer scope for more cooperation with Japan. I think Europe has really broadened its attention for this region. Our understanding of European sovereignty is an inclusive concept. We want to act with partners whenever possible, but we want to be able to act on our own whenever that's necessary. So the EU must not become a pawn of others, and it must accept its international responsibility and take an active role in shaping the future of the planet. One important aspect in that is digital sovereignty. That's why the Recovery Fund and the EU budget includes considerable funds for digital transformation, including on key aspects as artificial intelligence, blockchain, or quantum computers. Again, we don't look at this as a digital fortress Europe. A digitally sovereign Europe is seeking to reach out to like-minded partners around the world. The only way for Europe to be able to hold its own in the geostrategic great power rivalry between the US, Russia, and China is to hold together and to become more sovereign, also in terms of technology and industrial capabilities. And that's, of course, another area of cooperation with Japan. None of this will take us very far if we don't get climate change under control. So the green recovery is an important part of the European recovery programs, and the Green Deal, of course, has also been mentioned. We would like the EU to continue to lead on climate action and to send a strong signal to the international community. And now that the EU and Japan share the target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, there is again much scope for cooperation. So I think we have a lot to gain from working together. And in that spirit, I would like to propose a toast. Kanpai. Bye. Bye.